Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome to FXManiac. This is Syed Mahmoud Amiri again, and I'm back with another Tyflow tutorial after a month or so, maybe even more, but yeah, that doesn't matter. Okay, so we've taken a look at the basics of Tyflow, we've taken a look at the birth of spline operator, and in today's tutorial I'll show you guys how to use the cloth operator, which is a very powerful, I mean, we can say it's an engine, it's more than an operator. It does a lot of different things, and combined with other things, you can create some beautiful effects. So I'm just going to show you guys the basics of cloth, and then we're going to be taking a look at something like this, and then you know, basic example like this, which we're going to be taking a look at first, and then we're going to be talking about some cloth tearing and stuff. So you can do some pretty cool stuff with it. So I'm just gonna go inside 3D Studio Max and get started. Alright, so here I am inside 3D Studio Max, and I'm just going to drag this one out here because we don't need those two views so much. And I'm just gonna create a Tyflow first, a Tyflow icon. Just leave it be here. And when you want to convert an object to cloth in any 3D package, the main thing that is important is that you need to have a lot of detail. Alright, so if I create like a torus here and just give it some if I hit F4 and I hit like Shift J to hide the selection brackets, and in the previous 2021 Shift J it is, and if you're in the previous versions you can just hit J and it will hide the selection brackets. So if you want the cloth to be more detailed, like the example that we have here, so we have a lot of detail here, and when the thing kind of collides with it, so you need to have a lot of detail, and if you have lesser detail it won't be looking as much smooth and silky. Alright, so I want to convert this to cloth, so I'm just going to go into Tyflow and open the editor. I'm just going to put it aside. Usually I use like two monitors, one for my Tyflow and one for my viewport, but for the recording purposes I have to stick with this. Alright, I'm just gonna go with birth objects and just pick this and just hide the original object. Right click, hide selection, and now we have this object as a particle. So you can go ahead and hit tab here and type in like cloth, and the cloth bind operator will be here, and just drag it here. And you can also do it like this easy way, so just click on this event and hit tab and type in cloth bind, and it'll come up here. And the first thing you're going to notice is that you have these crosses, or these X marks that are there. So that is basically representing every single vertex of the object. So it's basically what it does is it's just these particles bind together, which is going to form the cloth for you. So the more detail you have, the more of these you're going to have, and the more smooth your cloth will be. So if I go ahead back to my torus and I select it and I increase these segments, you're going to see that we'll be having more of these these dots or these crosses, because we've increased the detail of the object, and hence we're going to have more detail on the cloth. Alright, and if you don't want to see these, you can just go ahead into the display and just untick mark particles with no geo. Alright, so now we have our cloth, and yeah, so now what to do with it? So we can apply some forces to it. So you apply a force, and there's no, if I add some like turbulence, you can see that our cloth is basically like folding up and all that. But two main things here. The first one is if I go into the cloth bind, we have some properties here. So you want the shape to be shape to cloth operation, activate all, and then you have some other settings like the stiffness, like how stiff will it be to stretching and shearing and bending. So you can increase them by your needs, and it will be that much stiffer and that much stronger to stretching and shearing, and also you can increase for bend. And the other thing is we have, like previously when Tyflow initially came out, it didn't have it, but now it has the Cuda collision solver, which is going to enable you to have self collision or inner particle collisions between the cloth bindings and cloth objects. So now you can see that it is going through itself and it's not colliding with itself. But then you can do one thing: you can enable this and you can enable self collisions, and yeah, they're now colliding with each other. The cloth is colliding with itself. So in order to access this, you need to download the Cuda files and install them, and you need to have a supported graphics card for Cuda. So that you need to keep that in mind. And just to clear things out, when you download Tyflow, you can download the optional Cuda DLLs and paste it to your 3ds Max directory, plugins directory, and it'll be alright. So go back to 3ds Max, and now you have access to this Cuda collisions. And so now we've enabled the self collisions, and now the cloth is colliding with itself. And you can imagine you can do some pretty amazing things with it. Alright, so the very first and very basic example that I will show you guys is how to create a really simple flag. So I'm just going to go back here inside here and just create a plane, just like this, and rotate it 90 degrees, move it up, scale it down, and stretch it down a little bit so it looks kind of like a flag. And as you already know, we need a lot of details for this, so I'm just going to go in and set it to like 40 by 40. Even that is not so much, but we can do that. So now I'm just going to add a cylinder for the pole. So there's some basic stuff just here, and increase the size. It was too small, so just increase the size a little bit and increase the height. So I'm just going to scale it here so that it encompasses that area of the flag. It looks pretty big, so I'm just going to scale it down, and you want to make sure that some part of it is inside the pole, so that we're going to be attaching it to the object so it collides with it. Alright, so the first thing, I'm just going to create a Tyflow and move it here, just like that. So I want to convert this object to a cloth. So birth objects, pick this object and hide it itself, add a cloth bind, and go to display, mark particles with no geo, and go to the cloth bind. Now we have it, but then we can also add a force. So add a force to it after the cloth bind, and we want it to go to this direction. So if I increase the strength for the wind to 1, it'll go up because of the Z value that is here. So I'm just going to right click to make it 0 and increase it to 1 on the x-axis because we want it to go this way. So it is going, but I need it to be attached to this object. Alright, so if I go ahead and bring this object a little bit more inside the cloth, so if I F3, we have some part of the object sort of going through the cloth. So and if I increase set the noise to turbulence and strength to 0.2, we will be having some wavy, like windy motions, but then the cloth is going that way, and I want it to be attached to the object. So what I can do is add a surface test and just bring it down here and pick the pole, and I want to say the surface test type if it is volume inside. If it is inside the volume, which it is right now, so if I hit F3, then what you want to do is you want to go ahead and add an object bind and bind it to this object, and you want to make sure that it is locked to surface. And now if I plug this in, so what it's basically saying essentially, if this cloth is inside this object, I want it to bind to this object, so I want it to be stuck to this object. So now, as you can see, it is stretching, and that's because it is continuously stretching because we set the value so high, the strength of the wind. So I'm just going to make it like 0.2. So now we have this, and even though that is too much, so 0.05. Now we have this, yeah. So now we have this moving cloth, and you can basically increase the strength of this, so just like that. But then the problem is you know, it's not colliding with the pole itself, and it's not colliding with itself also. And it's a little too much of a, you know, strength for the noise, and you can also increase or decrease the scale as much as you want. But this one I think is fine, just like that. So it's not colliding with itself, as you can see clearly here. So if I go into the cloth bind and go enable Cuda collision solver and self collisions, now the cloth will be able to collide with itself, and it's going to make it much more realistic. And as you can see here, it comes off here and it's not colliding with the pole itself. So that is very simple to fix. I'm just going to add a collision and move it down here and pick this object and make sure it is shape radius, and now it will be colliding with the pole. So now you can see that it is colliding. So now, depending on how much detail and how much smooth you want it, you can increase the detail, or you can just add like a turbo smooth. Sorry, if I go back to perspective view, go to modifiers and add a turbo smooth to it, and now it'll be much more smoother. So you have this cloth, which is smooth. I think the wind is a little too strong again, but yeah, it's fine. So just like that, you have a cloth animation, and you can texture it, you can light it and render it, and all that stuff. All right. So the next thing that I'm going to show you guys, and it's good that we have the cloth, the flag to show it, because it's a very common example. What if I want this cloth to be torn apart? So you have a very cool option here inside the cloth bind. You go down here and you have tearing. So what tearing is, it is like if it is stretched enough, then it will be able to, you know, get torn and tear apart. So if I enable tearing, the cloth will tear immediately because it has been exposed to that level of, you know, stretchiness that it will tear apart. All right, because we have the wind and the noise is too strong, and now the cloth is torn apart. So yeah, and again, you can go ahead, go back to the plane and increase the detail. So if I go and set it to like 60 by 60, I'll be having more detail and more of the pieces to be torn apart, just like that. And it is blazingly fast. I mean, Tyflow is really fast. So if you do this in something like Maya, you would have to like simulate it and then cache it, but then this thing is almost like real time. All right, so you have this, and yeah, that is basically it. And if I go ahead and turn on the turbo smooth, we'll be having more details to it. You can do like a pirate's like flag or something. You know, the possibilities are endless, right? So that is basically how you do like a simple flag, and hopefully I've shown you guys some properties and some values of the cloth that you can use. So we're going to be taking a look at this next example, which is really simple. So like some dancing, you know, spheres, which are cloth. So I'll show you some other techniques here as well. All right, so I'm just going to go quickly, and I'm not going to repeat the same things because it is very self-explanatory by now. So I'm just going to drag this here. I'll create a Tyflow here again. So for that, we just need like we don't even need a sphere. So just go here, and I'm just gonna right click, preset flow, simple icon flow. And we've already talked about this in the beginner part of the Tyflow for beginners. So if you haven't checked that out already, you can go ahead into the FXManiac, my YouTube channel. You can go and check this out. We talk a lot about the basics, and then you can come back to this. All right, so with this simple icon flow, we have some particles that are actually, you know, coming down here, and I'm just going to make it big so it encompasses some area. And I'm just going to draw a plane as well on the surface and make it very big, just like that, and hit M and give it like a simple material. So I don't want to be using Arnold, so I'm just gonna switch to V-Ray. Alright, so I'm just gonna go and apply a standard material to this, just like that. I want these particles to be spheres, so what I'm going to do is go into the shape. I'm just going to make this a bit smaller. I go into the shape and I want it to be geosphere. And the reason you want to be using geosphere for the cloth objects is because if you use a sphere, the distribution of geometry and edges and faces are not equal. So you can see we have some smaller faces, bigger, and also just continuing like that. But then if you set it to geosphere, what it does, it's just equal, from all the angles and everywhere along the surface of the object. So that makes it very cool to work with Tyflow. All right, so we have some geospheres. Want to make them bigger, so go to the size, make it like 600. So yeah, we have them. And now what if you want to turn them into cloth? All right, we have too many of them. I want it to be like 100. So just like that. So now you have this, right? So I'm just going to, we have like 100 particles. Now what if we want to turn them into cloths? You just add like a cloth bind operator and just put it below the thing, and now you have every one of them are cloth. And I'm just going to go into the display and mark particles with no geo. And if you really want to see they are cloth, you can just go ahead into add a collision operator. So collision, and I'm just going to go here after the cloth and pick this surface, make sure it is shape radius, and now they are colliding with the object. And the interesting is that we don't have no gravity back, but then they are kind of like getting smushed, and squashed. So we can go ahead into the cloth bind, and you can increase the stiffness for shear and for stretch, but still you're not going to be able to fix that problem. So you can go into the collision solver, Cuda collision solver, enable self collision, and that will sort of fix it a little bit, but then you can see that they are kind of losing their shape. All right, so what I want to do is first off, I want them to have gravity because they're just going up, right? So I'm just going to add some force here, add a force operator, and I'll add like -0.2 for the gravity strength. All right, so now they are falling down and they're kind of like getting smushed there. All right, and yeah, the other thing that we want to do, you can see that some of them are kind of like getting these weird shapes, and that's probably because we don't have enough substeps inside the Tyflow. So if you go into the main settings, you have time step, right? So it's frame. If you set it to like 1/4, it is going to make it, it's going to calculate more, and it is going to avoid those particles, getting those weird shapes. So yeah, we're not having those. And even if you have them again, you can go ahead and increase it even more to like probably 1/8 or something. But in this case, it seems to be solving the problem. But as you can see in this example, we have them, but they're kind of like, they're like bouncing balls, right? So they bounce back and then they get their shape back. So in order to do that, I'm just going to go and make them a bit bigger, probably lesser, but bigger. So like 60. And I'm just going to go into the shape, the size, probably like 1,000. And now we have like bigger particles to work with, right? So we have these, now they are colliding. But as you can see, they're not getting their shape back. So what we can do is we can go and add a modify bindings operator. So what it does is you can use this to create like inflated cloth and inflations and all that. So I'm just going to like bring it down here. And if I go back in a frame, when you add an operator, make sure you're on a on an early frame because you don't want it to calculate. So you have all these things, right? You want to go into the timing and set it to continuous. So you want it to do it continuously. And I'm just going to go into the modify bindings and increase the inflation to like 10. So now what you're going to do is they are going to inflate, right? So you can see that they're taking their shape back and they're looking like balloons, right? Yeah, but they are, getting their shape back. So that is what I wanted to do. And with this inflation, you can do some cool things. It is going to make the object inflate. So if I go ahead and show you in like a different example, so if I create like a little box here, it's the box, right? Yeah. So, and I want to give it some segments, right? So like 10 by 10 by 10, and I want to inflate this. So you go here and you add a birth object again, and you pick this object, you hide the original one, you add a cloth bind, go to mark particles with no geo, and I'll add a modified bindings operator. So what it does is, if I go into the inflation, you want to make sure that you set the timing to continuous, and if I go to inflation and set it to like 10, you will see that it is inflating, like, just like a pillow or something, right? So yeah, we'll be taking a look at this in some later tutorials, but I just wanted to show you guys, how to like inflate objects with Tyflow. So you can select the box here and add like a chamfer modifier to it and increase the segments. So you'll be having like more of a pillow looking object, so just like that. All right, so I'm just going to delete this and turn this off and turn our example back on. So we have this example and they are doing that. So they can be anything. They can be soccer balls, anything, but I just wanted to show you guys how to do this. And yeah, and we'll be taking a look at this example, which is really simple. And then finally, we're going to take a look at this example. I know this tutorial is getting long, but stick with me because I will show you guys some cool techniques, and I want to get this, give as much information and tips and tricks and techniques as possible. All right, so for that example, I'm just going to go ahead and reset again. And we need a text, right? So we want it can be a logo or anything. You can bring some Illustrator files and extrude it and all, but I'm just going to do it with a text. So I'm gonna go and create a text here, like FX, and I'm just gonna pick the Arial black and give it some kerning and add a bevel operator. Just increase the size, just like that. Level 2, 1, -1. I'm just going to rotate this, right? Just like 90 degrees. And the one thing that I will show you guys is, like, by default, the text doesn't have any segments. So we'll be adding some segments for it to be able to kind of like, get torn apart, just like these particles, right? So we'll go here and, as always, create our Tyflow and just drag it this much. So I'm just gonna create a birth objects again for the, I don't know, 1000 time. Just double click, pick this, and hide this main object. Now if I turn this into cloth, what will happen is that it will turn into cloth, but it only has some very limited, vertices and segments. So it won't be like, even if I add like a force here, so we'll give it some turbulence, like 1 after the cloth. So it won't be like, you see that it's kind of like, it looks like a very stiff and strong object because we don't have any segments, right? So what we need to do is we need to add a subdivide operator first, so that we'll be having more detail, and now we'll be having this text to kind of like behave like a proper cloth object. So because we have these details, and I'm going to go into the display and mark particles with no geo, go back here, and in the subdivide operator, the more detail you want, the more you have to decrease this. So like if I set this to 2, we're gonna have a lot more detail, and it will be like, just like that. So in order to do this, like kind of like, peeling, not like a peeling effect, but like kind of like a, I don't know, cloth destruction effect. And if you, by the way, if you want like a peeling tutorial, I've already done this here. So like how to peel anything using Tyflow, you can go ahead and check it out. I'm using the same technique. I'm using cloth, but like sort of a different technique to peel like an object. So if you want that, you can go ahead and check out that tutorial. And so now, I don't want the cloth to be affecting this until like a condition, because it needs to go from like left to right or whatever direction. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a box here, just like that. Again, I'm not sure why it's behaving strangely here. So we have this box. You want to make sure it's big enough to encompass the whole thing. And I'm just going to animate this. So just like hit N and go to like 80 frames and animate it across the surface of the cloth. So now we have this. And I'm just going to right click Object Properties, Display as Box. And the other thing I'm going to do is I'll add a surface test. So I want the cloth to only have these things. So I'll just drag out the force. If it is inside, if I pick this surface and I'll set the surface test type to be inside, volume inside. So what I'm saying is if this cloth is inside this volume, which it is getting here, I want you to go to another event. And if I plug this in here, and I need this display as well, so just shift drag it here. And if I change the color to red, you can maybe see it properly. And if I turn the force off, just to visually show you guys, right? So they're going here, and it's inside the object. And if I mark the particles with no geo, you can see that these particles are getting red because they are getting inside that force. So what I'm going to do is I'll turn this off and turn the force back on, so it'll be affected by the force, just like that. So now, guess what? What you can do is you can go into the cloth bind and go to tearing and enable tearing, and now you're going to be having your object torn apart, and it will be tearing, but then you also want it to go to that direction, to that X direction, right? So you can go into the force, set the wind direction to +1 on the X, and probably like 0.2 on the strength. So now you're having your object like going that direction. All right, so your object is getting torn apart, and just like that. All right. But then you can also make it very slow in order to encompass this object as well, or you can go ahead and increase the turbulence for it to like do it very quickly, because the more turbulent it is, the more faster it's going to get torn. All right, just like that. So now you can go and switch this. So if I go back to the text here, I can type in like what, FXManiac, and you'll be having, and the cool thing about Tyflow is just like it is updating in real time. It's so awesome, you know. You want you do need to adjust your animation, because I don't want it to happen from the beginning. So just move this box away here, and now you're having your object, and it is getting torn just in a very cool and interesting way, right? So that's how you do this example, and I've obviously added some lighting. And just a quick tip to render this out, of course you need the mesh operator, don't forget that in all your events, and just like add a little bit of a lighting and all that. So just going to show you guys, I'm using V-Ray, right? So just go ahead, add a light here, probably like a V-Ray dome, just to show you. And if I go into the V-Ray IPR in the viewport, you can see it's there, but I don't want this to be renderable, so I'll just hide this. So now you have your object. I mean, I'm just going to show you, I'm just showing you how to, like, you know, render this out, of course, but then, you know, the lighting and all that is all based on you and how you want it. So that is basically this example. And finally, getting to this final example, and I know it's getting already pretty long, but I just want to show you guys everything possible. So this is a very simple effect. You have a plane and it's getting, it's colliding with this object, and it's kind of like rotating in a vortex radial way. So very simple. I'm just gonna create a plane in the front view, make sure it is 0, 0, and just scale it down here and drag it here. So what am I doing? I hit Z on this, scale it up. I want this to have a lot of detail. So what I'm going to do is probably like 80 by 80. So that is basically there. And the other thing is, I'll create my Tyflow, click on it, and just open the editor. And of course, birth object, pick this and hide selection, and add the cloth bind. Go to display, mark particles with no geo. That is basically it, right? So we have the force operator here, but then we only have like wind, gravity, and some noises here. But the other thing that you can do is you can also have the spin effect and all, but I would much prefer you can also use the traditional 3ds Max forces. You can go into the forces and we have like a vortex. So I want it to be in the middle of this object. So just drag it here. And as you can see in this example, it kind of like, it is from the middle of the object. So I'm just going to go back here and just like that, make sure it is here. So if I pick this force, what will happen is it will just fall down, which I'm not sure why. But the thing you can do is you put it after the cloth, and now it is doing that. So the thing that is happening here is we need to increase the time step, because the time step is very low and it cannot keep up with that much of a motion. So just make it like 1/4 for now, and now you can see that your thing is actually sort of moving. But yeah, if I go ahead and put it inside here just a little bit more, so now it is kind of rotating. But then I also want this to have some turbulence, so like probably like 0.2, just like that. So it is getting that movement, but it's very, it's not that strong, right? So what I'm going to do is I'll select my force, go into the selection filter, helpers, warps, just select this. You have some values here. So you have the orbital speed, and then the radial pull. If I turn this up to 2, you can see that it is pulling inside, just like that. And you also have the orbital speed, which is the rotation speed. So if I turn this to 3, it will be rotating, just like we have the example here, right? But then the other thing that we don't have to forget is that it is not colliding with itself right now. So I'll go into the cloth bind, go enable the Cuda collision solver, and make sure the self collisions is on. And yeah, just like that, it is updating itself in real time. And you can see that we don't have a lot of detail here, but at the end we can definitely add a turbo smooth operator here. Where is the turbo smooth? Select the Tyflow, of course. Click here, Tyflow and turbo smooth. So now we have a much more smoother of a result. But then yeah, and you also need to increase the time step again. I mean, as much as you can. In the final example, I went to like 1/8, which would really give me some very smooth and silky sort of, it will make it more accurate. So I'll just set it to 1/4 for now, And as for the collision, it is very self-explanatory. You can just go ahead and I've added like a torus knot object, so you can see it is there like a torus knot. I'll go into objects, extended primitives, torus knot, and I'll just go ahead into the first frame and add a torus knot here, just like that. Man, what is happening with this creation thing today? All right, so we have this. Don't want it to be that big, just be it here, and I'm just going to go hit N, and about 60 frames I want this to come through this object. All right, just like that. So now in order for this to collide with the object, I need to go ahead and add the collision, operator. So just add the collision and make sure it is below everything, because sometimes the order matters. And pick this, make sure it is shape radius, and let us see what is happening here. All right. So now they are colliding, but as you can see, it is not that much, accurate. So if I hide this object, it'll be fine. Yeah. But even to make it even more accurate, you need to go ahead and if I go, it's already looking really nice. You can go ahead into the Tyflow and increase your time step to 1/8. So now it'll make it more accurate. The collisions and everything will be much more accurate. And till this is done. So I've added some lights here, some bright light from this side and not so much of a bright light from this side. And this material is like a V-Ray material with translucency and some reflection and all that. So you can do that by yourself. But then, yeah, you can see that we are having some really nice examples. So you can have a character moving through a cloth and it'll look really nice. So just like that. So I guess that is it for today's tutorial. I hope you guys have enjoyed it and most importantly learned something from this. The cloth's bind operator is a very powerful operator. You can do some pretty amazing things with it, and I'm sure there's like tons and tons of tutorials online on YouTube that you can check out, but I just wanted to do it my own way. And again, I hope you guys have learned something from it, and if you did, it would be a big help for me if you just if you're new to my channel, you subscribe to my channel and give this video a like. And if you've missed anything, just tell me in the comment section below and I'll do my best to answer it. Alright, so this was today's tutorial. Till the next one, enjoy working.